faculty member here in the School of Urban Studies and
We
Planning,
can sit for
and
me.
along with
Will
Roger
you sit
Heaney
for
and
me?
Chris Monsieur,
Sit for me.
who are running a little late today, we organized this
I'll switch
weekly
places.
seminar on a variety of transportation topics. And some logistics stuff first, and then I'll turn it over to our speakers. We are on the web, both live and archived, which means if you're going to ask a question, we would like you to use these microphones in front of you and hold down the button so the red light is on while you're asking your question. And try to speak as close to the microphone as possible, and that way the people watching on the web can hear the question. And we do actually have people who watch on the web, so there is a reason. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce a team of students in our Masters of Urban and Regional Planning program who are working on a project. We have something in the program called Planning Workshop that the students do for over 2 quarters in their final year here. And they work on various projects that they develop. And this project in particular is on the Sullivan proposal for a trail along Sullivan's Gulch. And today we have 3 members of the team. We have Joe Schaefer, Michael Hoffmann, and Morgan Will. And then not with us today, but who also worked on the project, is Darren Muldoon. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the 3 of you to present.
Okay, thank you. She sort of stole some of our thunder. I was going to tell you all about the MERP program here at Portland State and workshop, but she did a great job. Thanks, Jennifer. But I would like to introduce our presentation team. This is Joseph Schaefer, Michael Hoffman, and I'm Morgan Will. And she said Darren Muldoon had to work today, so we're sorry he couldn't make it. But he's also part of our team. So we'll just go ahead and give you a little summary of what we're going to talk about today. We have our introduction, which I'm doing now. We have a virtual tour we created, and we're going to present that. It's about 11 minutes. And then we'll talk about our study and our findings, and then have some time for discussion. So just a little introduction of the trail idea. The Sullivan's Gulch Trail is just a name. It could be named anything. It's what it's named now. Back in '93, they were doing some work on a bicycle master plan for the city of Portland. So the corridor was recommended and then included in the bicycle master plan in '96. I just happened to be interested in the trail corridor before I was in school and worked on it to help get it on to Metro's regional transportation plan in 2000. I volunteered with Metro to do some outreach and get the community involved through the years. In 2001, it was adopted onto the Metro's regional trails plan, which is a little different than the regional transportation plan. And then in 2003, Metro moved to put it on what's called a financially constrained list for projects so that it could be funded. And so because of all this action sort of building up to the project being maybe ready to get into some planning stages, a PSU engineering class, actually headed by our Dr. Pertini of the transportation seminar, did a study of the corridor from an engineering sort of physical feasibility perspective, and we definitely used a lot of that material in our analysis. Want to talk about that, and then figuring we could follow up on that pretty well as part of our workshop project. We approached Mel Huey of Metro and asked if he would be our client for our workshop, and I want to thank him. He's here today, and as part of that partnership. He asked for 3 main products, most of which you'll see today. There's the virtual tour, like I said, we'll show you. There's a brochure, which we have up front. If anybody would like to take one at the end, you're more than welcome. And then we'll talk about our study findings, which we have a written document we'll produce and be giving to our client, and that'll be available, hopefully, in the future in a PDF format on the web. So right now I'm going to go ahead and show the virtual tour. Like I said, this is about 11 minutes, and so if you would just enjoy this, and if you have any questions about the slides, we can come back to it afterwards. Sorry, there's no audio.
Oh, I thought you were the audio.
This is our key. You can see the yellow marks the trail.
just cleaned it this morning.
Sweeping.
In preparation for the trail.
We have some nice photos with trains in the pictures. So the goal of this virtual tour is to help you visualize what the trail might look like. The alignment was mostly based on the engineer's work. Twelfth Avenue. You can see the space under bridges. Notice not only under the bridges, but also how the trail's at the top of the slope. We'll talk more about those things. Yeah, those are connections to the community. Usually they're at bridges or at streets that dead end to the trail, that you could create a trailhead. This is a real hot spot, so this is something to think about. You see the narrowness. See the width of the trail.
People will be eliminated, obviously.
In the concrete cross.
One alternative is to go around this hotspot. It's very difficult and would require much engineering.
You might mention that you think the path might be 12 feet wide.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, those standards. Yeah, definitely. This is about halfway the length of the trail, 33rd Avenue. Sandy Boulevard. You can see with the train. One of the things we'd love to have feedback is if the slide transition gives you enough time to see it, because this is a product we'll be giving for other people to view. If it's too fast or too slow to grasp all the images. So this is 60th Avenue. That railroad spur in the middle is abandoned or not used. So the left railroad is not used. It's 82nd Avenue. It's approaching 205. It's Rocky Butte in the background. So this is the connection, the gateway. So again, we'd like to thank the engineering students for helping us create the virtual tour by giving us a proposed alignment, and our professors for their support, and of course Mel Hewitt Metro for his partnership. Again, this was one of the products for our project, and I'll also be at the end of the meeting be interested in giving out my email for any public comment if people want to include this, because this is sort of a preliminary stage. We haven't finished our product. So this presentation today is to get some information out there, get some feedback, and finish up more details later. So to get back to our presentation, I'm going to do the show again here. So as watching the virtual tour, we hope that you saw some things that brought up questions from your perspective about the trail and want to know the answer to those. What we did when we started our partnership is we wanted to know what questions should we ask in our study, what needs to be answered. And so we had an approach of going out and asking the public, asking professional planners, doing research and other Rails with Trails projects and studies to try to get those answers. And through our feedback from surveys and attending public meetings, we were able to get our project on some websites. Some themes came out of all the different individual questions. These are the four themes, really, is project viability. What's the viability of doing such a trail? If a trail was to exist, what would be the quality of that trail for users? There's some certain issues people had with it, putting a trail there, even if you built it. And then, what would be the benefits to the community? Why would we want to do it? And then, well, if I'm supposed to plan this thing, how am I going to go about it? What are the implications for the planning sector and citizen advisory committees and the like? So, to start with the first issue would be project viability, and there was kind of three areas we felt we could address under that: as physical feasibility, proximity to the railroad, and demand. So there's kind of sort of subcategories. Under physical feasibility, we really didn't do a lot of work. We used the engineering study as our guide. And what the engineering study at Portland State did was try to answer a few questions. Is there space for it? Will it fit through a corridor without having to knock down bridges or bulldoze a lot of buildings? And most importantly is can it be done at ADA grade? There's a lot of slopes in the area, and so this is an example of one of the maps that shows the blue line is the trail alignment, and at the bottom they have what's called a profile, which basically shows the slope of the trail. So if you were riding on the trail, would you be going up a steep or shallow slope? And as you can see, the alignment is placed pretty much at the top of the slope most of the area. And follows the grade and is ADA accessible. There's also, as you see in this slide, they looked at access to the neighborhood, and those access ramps or trails would also need to be ADA accessible. And they also identified, such as in the storage area you saw in the virtual tour, areas where you might need an alternative route, and they looked at those alternative routes and also found that they can be ADA accessible. And there is enough width in those corridors. They also did for us some examples of cross-sections of the trail. So this would be one in an area where there was level ground, which, amazing to say, there is some areas with level ground. They did areas where if you wanted it to be raised above the ground, perhaps in an area where it's just wet, it'd be on piles, on a semi-steep slope, and then on a very steep slope. So those are some issues that will need to be addressed in the design factor later on. Through our research, we also found out issues with Rails with Trails projects is they want to have separation from the railroad itself. This will be a Rails with Trail project for the whole length of the corridor from the Willamette River to I-205. In this picture, you can see the center line of the railroad, and there's a certain distance you need for the edge of the trail. Three other ways you can help separate it besides the distance is putting physical barriers such as vegetation or fencing between the trail and the railroad. You can also have the trail be vertically above or below the railroad. In this case, more likely it would be above. And you can also have, well, I guess I said, horizontal separation, so distance from the trail. And so those are what things you saw on the virtual tour, was examples of the trail would be best suited at the top of the slope, a far distance, vertically raised, with space for vegetative separation. And related to Mel Huey's point about specifications, there's design standards for off-street paths or rails with trails. A certain distance from the center line, as I mentioned. This schematic shows 10 to 25 feet. Looking at other trails, those are around the nation. Those are some standards that have been successful. I'm sorry?
Did you get this from Planning?
Yeah. This graphic was from Alta Planning. Oh, well, a study they did for the Department of Transportation, actually.
This is a working document.
Yeah.
For this trail, you know it's
Oh, yeah. Push the button.
Since this is a work in process, regional trails, we would like the standard to be 12 feet, even though this,
Correct.
I think that's important to slightly adjust the
Right.
metric and the English thing on that one for your future, especially the one you're doing at Metro next week.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mel. The trail corridor width. There are some tight spots, as we saw on some of the slides on the virtual tour. But for most of the length, there is room for a very large width, up to 14 feet. So these are some of the things that will need to be assessed: the distance from the center line and the widths of the trail. Some other issues is since the alignment is proposed to go under bridges, you'd have to make sure that there was clearance and proper slope approaching and departing from the bridges to meet ADA, American with Disability Act requirements. And there's many different types of design engineering features you can do to create protection of the users from hazards such as the train or falling off the edge. This is an example of fencing. We didn't look a lot into soils, but we did note a soils map that talked about different stabilities of soils. This is just the colors schemes represent different stabilities of soils. What we found is that they've built a light rail max in the corridor. There's an interstate. There's a railroad. There's housing above the slopes. So engineering-wise, things could be built. So it's feasible. The cost estimates and things like that we did not look into. So the viability of its being close to the railroad, some people felt that building a trail next to a railroad is not a good idea. So we did some research, and a recent study showed that there was 61 trails in the U.S. Next to active rail lines, of which 14 are fairly new. Some of them happen to be actually in Portland. This is an example of the Almsey to Springwater section in southeast Portland. It's railroad on the Ross Island Bridge. You have the Still Bridge Riverwalk in northeast Portland. That bridge is actually owned or operated, that lower section there, by a railroad company. And of course, the bridge to the east side Esplanade, it goes over the Union Pacific tracks. And one you might not have thought of is actually the I-205 trail along Airport Max. Technically, it's a rails with trails segment. So it is possible. And here are just a few examples of other trails in and around the region, as you can see, that are right next to railroad tracks with different standards and designs. We also asked, well, does anybody really want this trail? And that was a really hard question for us to answer, and we don't know if we fully answered it. But we looked at, well, how many people live in the area? We thought maybe if there's a lot of people there, maybe there'll be enough people that are riding bikes to demand it. And I'm sorry if this not sure if this is readable enough, but basically in that graphic here, I'm sorry, that's a half-a-mile study area, just people that were in a short walk or biking distance to get to the trail. We found that there's almost 40,000 people, and there's a growing population in that area. I don't have the exact percentage of the city of Portland, but you can see the city of Portland's population is 530,000 in the 2000 census. So 40,000 is a pretty significant portion of that. We also looked at of employment numbers, how many people work in that area, so maybe people would be commuting to that location and using the facilities. There's some statistics showed that 17,000 people are working in the Lloyd district area and 82,000 in the downtown area, and so those people might be able to use this facility. Of the downtown area, there was about a 4% mode split for bikes, and Lloyd has a 5% mode split. And in an interview with the Transportation Management Association, they talked about they want to increase that to a 10% ride share.
The Lloyd number is a bike share?
Yeah, I was a little bit mixed up in my notes there, but I remember he talked about of the ride share mode split, the 5% ride share was the word he used, and but yeah, maybe it was mode split is the word I should have written. Yeah.
It's the,
That number, Darren made that number. That number comes from the amount of commuters downtown to the downtown area, and what's the mode split for commuters downtown? It was 4% split
Yeah.
for bikes.
Yeah. So those are the reason why we looked at these numbers, and perhaps we should portray them a little bit more clearly. Thanks. Is that of those people that are living in that area or working in that area, how many can we get there? And we found that it seems to be a significant number. And we also used a metro methodology of figuring out approximate users. And the top left number is probably the most important. Using these variables and comparing with other trails, we estimated 740 daily users. I think that might be a little bit low, but it's based on a standard thing. Depends on the quality of the trail, probably. That compares with 720 daily users for a waterfront path in Vancouver, a smaller city, obviously, and 830 daily users for the Springwater Corridor. And just one last thing about demand or viability or demand for the trail is people trying to get places. This is just one example of somebody who would be at point A, which is about 79th Avenue, and would like to get to point B, which is the 82nd Avenue Max station. And currently they would have a limited number of options to get there because the streets to the south are dead-end streets. But by building a trail, the person would be provided with lots more options to get to their location and would liven up the neighborhood. So in terms of demand for connectivity and options for travel, this is just one example of how the trail would improve that. Michael's going to talk here about the quality of trail for users.
There we go. Okay, so as Morgan was talking about, and as you saw in the virtual tour, one of the biggest things we got when we did our public outreach, when we spoke to people, we had a web survey out, and our project was listed in a newsletter where we also got some feedback. We did neighborhood association meetings. We spoke with planners around Portland. One of the biggest things that comes up, and you probably get this from the virtual tour, is why would I want to go down there? Why should there be a trail down there? When I first heard about this from Morgan as a potential topic for a workshop, I remember thinking, why? Why? We have this great bike network, great surface street bike network. Why do we need this? But then the more I looked into it, there were a lot of things I liked about it, and that was one of the reasons why I kind of jumped on board with this. So I'm kind of going to talk about this second major theme, which is the quality of trail for users. And I'm going to look at noise and pollution, safety and security. First of all, noise and pollution. It's a huge issue with this trail. As you saw in the virtual tour, there's plenty of garbage laying around there. I think that could be easily mitigated if you're building a trail there. You can clean that up. I don't think that's a huge issue. Noise, however, is a huge issue. You're going through a highway corridor. You've got it's a very busy highway corridor. You've got light rail, and then you've got freight train coming by at up to speeds of 55 miles an hour. Noise is a huge issue. That being said, there are plenty of examples where noise is an issue in a lot of other public circumstances where pedestrians and bicyclists spend their time. Looking at this slide here, MAC station. The MAC stations are located right in the middle of all this. And unlike on a bike where you're just kind of passing through, here you're just standing there taking it. So the point here, and you can go through these slides a little quicker here. The point here of showing these slides is basically to say it's not a deal killer for this trail. Noise in and of itself should not be a deal killer for this trail for many reasons. First of all, we're in an urban environment. It's an urban trail. You're up on a slope at a lot of different points along the trail, as you probably saw on the virtual tour. There is quite a bit of vegetation. You could add vegetation. You could have a fence that you then vegetate to mitigate the noise. After all that, there's still going to be a little noise. There's no doubt about it. But as far as a deal killer, I don't think that it could be perceived that way, because there's plenty, like we're showing in these slides here, you can keep going through. There's plenty of other trails in Portland that are right along active rails. You've got the East Bank Esplanade Trail, which was very expensive to build, and you've got a highway right on top of you. But people use it and people love it. So I think that noise could certainly be mitigated. We can move through here. And there's our trail going up there. As you can see in that alignment, that proposed alignment, you don't see it anymore. You've got vertical separation from the rail as well as horizontal separation. And if you can keep some of this vegetation as much as you can and then plant some more, you can mitigate the noise. Okay. Moving along to safety. Safety was another huge issue that people brought up. Safety is interesting, though, because there's a lot of different ways to look at safety when you're talking about a trail like this. One of the things we heard right off the bat was people saying, oh, I don't know if I want to go down there. It's, because when you think about it, you're on this trail, and it's almost like an open-air tunnel in a way, because the access points are at the bridges. So you've got these long stretches where you can't go this way, you can't go that way. You're on the trail. You're either this way or this way. So the question came up, well, what happens if someone jumps out, and what do you do about that? There's a bunch of things you could do about it. You could have volunteer and police bike patrols go down there. You could have sufficient lighting. There's a lot of different ways to mitigate that safety issue. That being said, we're in a city. Any street that you walk down at different times, you should ride with somebody. There's a lot of different kind of common sense, practical things that go into mitigating safety issues. Some of the pictures we're showing here, going underneath the bridges, that's another concern for people. It seems a little shady. It gets a little scary to people when they're thinking about going under these underpasses, which you would be going through on the Sullivan Gulch Trail. You're not going up onto the streets and over the bridges. You're going underneath them. So you've got these underpasses. It can be very scary places. They're dark. They've got little nooks and crannies. But these pictures kind of show that it's been done before. It exists in Portland right now. And certainly during the day, it's going to be a much better time to ride from a safety standpoint, from a personal security standpoint. It's going to be better. Here's some of the recommendations: lighting, landscaping with view corridors, building orientation to trail. I'm not sure what that means. Public access points, like I mentioned before, police, bicycle, and community patrols. But then here's the other side of the safety issue. The other side of the safety issue that just didn't come up from the meetings, but this is something that I think is a huge selling point of this trail, is that it would be one of the only places in Portland where you have a continuous trail where you're not crossing streets, where you're not crossing tracks. And what's nice about that is you're not dealing with traffic. It's mode separation. It's one of the most beautiful things about this trail, and I think a major selling point is that it's mode separated. It's continuous and it's unimpeded, either by traffic or stop signs or red lights or anything else. So from a safety standpoint, you're not going to get hit by a car on this trail. That may seem like a kind of a simple, easy thing to say, but that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't get on a bike to begin with. So if you can get people onto a trail where they know that they can bring their kid, it's funny because you look at that trail and you think it looks, it's very urban. It's going to have a very urban feel to it. It's near a highway. It's near train tracks. But oddly enough, it's be a very safe place to ride because you're not dealing with traffic and you're not dealing with cars, and that is a major reason why people don't bike. Moving along to kind of this is kind of like the third major theme, benefits to the community. Connectivity of this trail, another huge selling point. There are no real good east-west bike links in this town. And now forget about on-street bike links. I'm talking about, we have the I-205 path that runs north-south. We have the East Bank Esplanade that then goes through the OMSI Springwater, turns into the Springwater Corridor Trail. That's a huge link, north-south. What you don't have is this east-west link that this would provide. It would connect you from the I-205 bike path over to the East Bank Esplanade. But more than that, it connects you to all those other regional trails I just talked about. You get to the East Bank Esplanade, you're on what they call the 40-mile loop. So you can get on a bike near the Sullivan's Gulch Trail, get on that. You can get out to Boring, Oregon without ever dealing with traffic. And that last slide that he showed with the map, if you can go back to that real quick, that's just showing the access points and how this kind of ties in with the street bike network, which it does quite well. And here's just a table of links, bike network links that it ties into. Transit network, as we know, a lot of people will take their bikes and put it on Max or put it on a bus to complete one link of their journey. And this just shows how it links up with the transit network. And here's all the bus lines and light rail stations that are served. Because one of the great things about this trail, because it's in this rail corridors are like real central arteries in any urban environment. And so I think there's a lot of transferability with this project, with other urban areas. And the fact that it has been done in a lot of places all around the country shows that planning agencies, trail planners you're kind of, when you reach build out in a city, you need these, it's very hard to find continuous linear corridors to put a trail like this in. And rail corridors are pretty much some of the only places left to do it. And so that's why we think that it's not a bad idea to try to check it out and do it. Metro 2040 goals. This trail, one of the big things in Metro 2040 is the development of centers, major centers, and this trail would, as you can see in this map, connect 4 of those real vital centers, obviously to Central City, and then you got Lloyd District. Thanks for moving through that too fast. Downtown, you just keep going here, go through some of these pictures. The Rose Quarter, here's some of the landmarks that the trail is directly adjacent to, the Lloyd Center, Hollywood District. And the Metro building is in there. Well, shout out to the Metro folks. Providence Medical Center. And these are all places where a lot of people work. So you've got, you're not only are you talking about a large residential population, but you've also got a large employee destinations that this trail will take you to. Not sure what that's about.
Michael?
Yes.
I think the health issue is a good one because Providence is the main sponsor of Bridge Pedal, so they could be kind of like an adopter of a section of this trail.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, but is what are some of the ways to pay for this trail? You get people to adopt it. Okay, other benefits. 40-mile loop. This connects in with the 40-mile loop. I mentioned that before. And then the rest of these, reduced vehicle miles traveled. That's kind of just a basic benefit of any trail is that, one of the big things in the city of Portland is we're getting real dense, and if you want to densify your community, then you better give people places to go play, and not have to use their car to do it. City beautification. That trail, when you look at it on the virtual tour, it doesn't look spectacular, but one of the things is that if you build a trail like this, and this is just something I found through the literature, if you build a trail like this, and people start using it, people get invested in it, then they want to do something. It's almost like if you see a house and you see someone's backyard and they're not doing anything with it, well, you don't care, it's not your backyard. You buy the house, now you want to do a lot of things to it. Well, this could become someone's backyard, and all of a sudden they want to, so people adopt little parts of it, vegetate fences, restore wetlands. And bragging rights, I'm not sure what that's about. Okay. And now we're going to move on to Joseph, and he's going to talk about some of the planning implications, apparently. Get this thing out of here. Oh.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about some of the planning implications, including land ownership in terms of who owns the land where the trail is actually going to be placed. The railroad is the primary landowner, and we need to work with them, obviously. There are some redevelopment opportunities happening, albino fuel being the most obvious one, and we'll talk about that as well. The trail crosses about a little less than a mile of private property. The railroad owns 76%, which is the vast majority of it. Of the 1,660 feet of public property, there's a couple sites owned by Metro and the City of Portland, and then there's also quite a stretch of right-of-way up in the 70s and 80s along Jonesmore, where the existing right-of-way can be used. Go ahead. Before I get to the rail company, I just want to explain there are basically two primary types of private property that would need to be acquired for the trail. In the Sullivan's Gulch neighborhood, there's a stretch in the 20s of street numbers where there are residential properties on top of the hill, but the lots actually extend well down the hill. And the trail would go through about 7 or 8 properties there and effectively bisect those properties. And the important thing to remember there from the acquisition point of view is when you do something like that, the property between the trail and the railroad becomes largely useless to the private property owner. So even though you may think you only need to buy a 16-foot path or a 20-foot path, you end up actually purchasing quite a bit more real estate than that. The second type of property impact, and you saw this on the virtual tour in at least one example, is when you get further to the east, where there's a great deal of commercial and industrial property built quite close to the top of the hill. There's several parking impacts. There's only one location where a building corner is actually going to need to be trimmed off. There is one billboard that would need to be replaced or moved. But there are several properties where rows of parking and then in other cases circulation lanes behind a building. The surveying and engineering hasn't gotten to this level of detail yet, but it may well be that there's some encroachment back there. Actually, I'd be surprised if there wasn't some encroachment back there. And once the engineering gets a little further along, these issues could be clarified. In terms of dealing with the railroad, their primary concern is that they're a freight railroad. They don't have time to monitor a trail or maintain a trail or deal with accidents, deal with people interfering with their freight corridor. As Morgan mentioned, the freight rail line is a high-speed line. It's a heavy rail. And to do this effectively, we're going to need as much trail separation as possible, which is why we want to move the trail as close to the top of the hill as we can. In those areas where we can't do that, we need to come up with alternate means of safety, such as fencing. As described before, this has been done several times before. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are some established institutional guidelines, such as the AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, I believe, which is a terrific resource for technical information. This next series of slides is going to talk about and show typical development that's near the corridor. And the purpose for showing this, and there's your Metro building, Mel, is to talk about what opportunities there might be for additional development near the corridor that could have links to the trail, could benefit by the trail, and sort of get some action going on down in what can be considered sort of a no man's land. Albino fuel site is an important one. There have been a variety of redevelopment concepts presented for that. They are moving their business to Vancouver. Crandall Aramula did a planning study of the site, which included a link in the trail. Then as you move further out east, you get more of this sort of industrial and warehouse and commercial type projects. Again, many of these, and this is one example I think here at Providence, where the trail may clip some of the parking. The advantage in these situations is for employees, the convenience simply is excellent. The other thing to keep in mind is because the trail is effectively behind most of these commercial buildings, there doesn't need to be a lot of investment on the part of the property owner on their front doors, so to speak. They don't need to rearrange their driveway entrances and things like that. As you get further east, there's quite an opportunity to link the trail with open space and parks especially. There's simply more room out there. This is a good slide of areas right out by 205. We've talked about a connection essentially going straight through this slide up toward Rocky Butte, whereas the trail itself would kind of follow the rail line there. The idea here is pocket parks. I mean, there's room in lots of these areas to do something more than put a trail through. This was obviously MLK Boulevard. I believe this is Metro property, Metro City of Portland. I forget who. But again, you have a large, relatively natural-looking area that doesn't get a lot of use right now, except for transients and homeless campers. If I could switch over to funding, one of the goals of our study is to help Mel Huey prepare an application for MTIP funds to pursue additional study of the trail to take it to the next level of design and engineering. Metro has specific criterion for scoring bicycle projects, and they basically boil down to the safety issues, for which this trail will score very high for the simple reason that it's separated from the streets. That's the primary thing. If we can show that there aren't conflicts with autos and other vehicles, we'll be able to score really high on that. A second major criterion is use of the trail. We've run through that demand model and shown and are very confident that the trail can produce the same types of ridership that the other trails in the Portland area have already been built. A third major criteria for the MTIP funding is the cost. We don't have any hard cost numbers. Clearly, there's an enormous amount of engineering work to be done simply because of the slope. There are some areas where the trail can be put on grade, but for many, many lengths of the trail, there's going to need to be retaining walls or pilings or something on the order of what you saw earlier. There's also some alternative funding options that we've mentioned before a moment ago from Mel. Ideally getting people to adopt a segment of the trail or sponsoring a segment of the trail. In this case, we would look to the major institutions that are on the trail, such as Providence, such as Fred Meyer in Hollywood, potentially the railroad as well, trying to get some corporate buy-in, literally and figuratively. Another concept we have relates to the underpasses. I think there's 22 or 23 bridges. Some of them are quite elevated and there's not really much happening there, but the city streets where they cross over the corridor tend to be smaller or have lower ceiling, and some of them are very wide, and there's some really nice concrete walls. And we had the idea of putting murals down there. It would liven it up and be something to involve the community and get them down there. Habitat restoration, in addition to sort of the cleanup, there's been a lot of discussion about what are you going to do with the invasive species, what are you going to do with the blackberries, what are you going to do with the ivy, what can be done to replace those, not just for visual, but again also for use as a buffer. The key result we're aiming at is ownership of the trail by the public, and I don't just mean sort of getting Portland Parks and Recreation to accept the trail and maintain the trail, but we really need for people to use the trail, be invested in the trail, and want to be involved with the trail. Anybody, could sort of just build a stretch of pavement, but that's not really going to do it. And I'd like to conclude with a few remarks about that. The key attribute of this trail is that it connects the 4 regional centers in addition to various neighborhoods. I forget how many neighborhood associations.
14.
We have 14 neighborhood associations that are adjacent or very close to the trail. And this would allow folks to get between those two, between different locations in this area by bicycle, which for right now really is not practical. There is no direct east-west route in the area. Again, we have good links to transit to and from the trail. And again, it's a direct route. Obviously, it's a great corridor. That's why the railroad was put there 100 and some years ago, and other things since then. Additional sort of ancillary advantages are it could hopefully improve public safety in the Gulch. Public safety in the Gulch is not good now. There is a lot of illegal activity. There's a lot of illegal camping. And hopefully by bringing people down into the Gulch, we can liven up that area, get some eyes on it, and improve what is currently a bad situation, frankly. And similar to this, it takes the vacant land in the north portion of the corridor and puts it into more productive use. Obviously, we'll encourage higher density in the centers. Sort of the health implications that Mel spoke about earlier is also a key thing. Getting people off their seats and onto their bikes, we think is a good thing. Just a quick acknowledgments page again. The alignment was selected by the engineering students working with Robert Pertini last semester. And we are the MERP students, the planning students. And then we're going to do our thing for the next few weeks and button up our products, and then pass the project over to Mel Huey at Metro, and hopefully he'll be carrying the ball forward from there.
And don't forget, remember to use the microphone.
Yeah, Ariana.
So you're saying that Portland would have jurisdiction over the trail even though it would be a regional trail?
Yes, potentially the City of Portland Parks and Recreation would take over the trail once it's constructed. And this has been done before, and I know it's planned for a segment of the Springwater Corridor that I'm working on now over in Selwood. Obviously, they'll work closely with Metro. For example, the Springwater Trail segment in Selwood that isn't built yet, but Metro owns the real estate, and it's a rail corridor as well. But the idea is that once it gets developed, the City of Portland will manage it. And in addition, the City of Portland is very involved with design issues. Yes?
What's the bicycle pedestrian mix on I-205, which is a kind of similar kind of route? And the follow-up question is, are there any ADA rules that would prevent it from being a bicycle-only highway, or is pedestrian access mandatory?
Well, I can answer part of that. The second part is a little bit easier. When our talking with the planners, they noted that it's not on the pedestrian master plan for the City of Portland, because there's some confusion. If it gets put on the pedestrian master plan, it will require to be funded every time somebody builds something next to it. So at this time, it's not officially a bike corridor on the City of Portland. Or sorry, officially a pedestrian corridor on the City of Portland. So yeah, potentially it could be built for a bicycle trail only.
Like a bike.
But of course, I think bike trails have to be at ADA requirement, even if they're built for bikes. So I don't think there would be much different. It would just be a matter of what would the width goal be? Would you want to have it wide enough that there's enough room for bikes to pass pedestrians?
I'm just thinking about it from a safety point of view, and the kind of speeds that you could generate on a level ground bike path.
Yeah, that's definitely why the recommendation is to go 14 feet in width so that there's enough room. There's also probably going to be some talk later, I know, with the South Waterfront. They'd ask, well, should we have it separated, bike and ped, or should it be together? And that might be an issue for this trail, is do you want to have it separated, especially on steep slopes where a design that's separated could create like a stairwell rather than a really broad, flat surface on a steep slope.
To answer your first question, we did not look specifically at that question when we were getting into the demand side of the project. We decided to look exclusively at bikes. Just sort of anecdotally, I would estimate maybe 3/4 of the folks that I've seen driving up and down 205 are bicyclists. 25% peds. Yeah. Yeah.
Quick question in the front.
Yes, I noticed when it was running through the tour that there was a lot of properties that it was running past along fence lines. What sort of issues are going on with things like why do people have the fences up now, and what sort of effects would you predict that having to put a trail there?
Well, one comment I want to add is that some of those fences are, as Joseph said, encroaching on the right-of-way of other owners. So if you look at the maps, the fences are actually don't stop at property lines. But I do know that some of in commercial areas, they're yards for the operations, so they might have their delivery trucks in those yards, or pallets or equipment. And so they're just basically stopping general theft. The homeowners, of course, have fences in their backyards, like most people. Currently, the areas of overgrowth vegetation, blackberries, which would be a hindrance to most of us, are not hindering transient use of that area. And so the fences are a secondary thing, to keep transients from coming up from the railroad into their yards, as basic logic.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dana.
I just was wondering what kind of interaction, if any, you had with businesses or some of the property owners adjacent to where the trail will go, and what their thoughts were about it.
Well, actually, I can answer that. I was thinking about it as Morgan was just talking. One of the big concerns that has come out of our public outreach is everybody who lives in that corridor knows that there's quite a bit of transients in the area, quite a bit of homeless camping in the area. And there was some concern about if you build a trail, you're kind of giving free and easy movement to what's kind of already happening, almost kind of supporting that movement. And in supporting that, will you be kind of inviting people into my backyard as the guy who has so that is a big concern, but I actually think it might work the other way. By having more eyes down there, by having more people down there, by having people become invested in that area, you might actually take away that threat. The more people watching, the less likely someone's going to do something illegal. So, and what was the first part of your question?
Just basically, if you've done any surveying or had any contact with any of the like Providence or some of the apartment complexes, either formally or informally.
Well, what we did is the goal of our public outreach was to figure out what questions to ask. And so we, as student groups, didn't really have funding. That there's such a long corridor and there's so many interests, especially, not just adjacent property owners, but within a buffer. There's so many units. We decided not to do that, not to do an individual household survey. What we did is we sent out questionnaires to the chairman of planning or transportation committees at business and neighborhood associations. So we did get feedback from them, and we'll include that feedback sort of summarized in our document. But basically it added up to these are the questions. They're worried about safety, and whether it was for somebody climbing over their back fence and stealing their bicycle, or if it was for graffiti on the side of their building. Those details we didn't get. They said, my issue is this. John and then Michael. And then.
Did you consider doing any type of travel time comparison for a bicyclist using this trail compared to the on-street?
I thought very seriously about doing that. When we first started out this project, I wanted to do like a full GIS travel time analysis, and I was looking at different ways and talking to guys at Metro about, how would I do that. And there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But in general, and this kind of goes back to something Dr. Milner pointed out before, there is the potential for this trail, should it be built, to kind of become like a bike commuter highway. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that. The disadvantage, like Dr. Milner pointed out, is that you would have people moving very quickly, and then what about the grandmother pushing the stroller? What happens to her? But then the other side of it is you're going to get where you want to go a lot faster. And what I think would be interesting for the planning process as it moves forward is to further look at that issue and see. It's my belief, as I just broached the topic, I just broached the issue a little bit, but it's my belief that people would make a beeline from wherever they live, north or south of that trail, to the trail, and then take the trail rather than taking surface streets the whole way. You got different types of bike riders. You got bike riders who couldn't care less that there's a truck on either side of them, and they're diehard, and that's the way they're gonna ride. But then you've got a substantial bike population who would like to have a trail where they can move quickly and do so safely without having to interact with cars or red lights. But the travel time issue is something we have it in our report to Metro that is something that they should look at because it's a potential very major selling point for this trail.
I think you've got a mode that's going to be faster than Max.
It would be faster than Max. You'd probably move 4 times as fast as the streetcar. So.
I think, got a couple questions over here.
I know the PSU students came through with at least a first drafted a solution for an alignment. It looks like from your virtual tour where you had all those dotted lines sort of coming down from the top of the hill down to access the trail, it looks like it might even be a more complex engineering problem figuring out how to get these people down to the trail from those access points that you have and the series of ramps or maybe elevators that would be necessary because it was so steep. Is that something they looked at in their study?
And it would be ramps. I don't believe we looked at elevators, but certainly, we're routing the trail underneath the bridges. You're going to have grade changes there, anywhere from 14 feet up to 26 feet, 28 feet, and those would likely happen with ramps that were essentially parallel to the main alignment of the trail.
It would be a lot like a freeway off-ramp. Since there's a great distances, they could start the off-ramp at an appropriate distance. That way you wouldn't have to have a switchback. It is the alignment that most of the engineers suggested. There were some sections like at 39th Avenue where 39th Avenue doesn't connect to the soil until way after Halsey. And so if you wanted to access directly to 39th, maybe you would put an elevator there. But most locations would simply be like a highway off-ramp, just a grade. And in the engineering alignment, the design standards, one design standard we didn't mention is the City of Portland has a bicycle design guideline, allow for steeper slopes for off-ramps or access ramps. So they would be able to access a short distance, not too complicated, or no bridges. There would be no requirement based on existing alignment for bridges, for example.
So did some of those off-ramps get very, very long? I mean, I'm assuming if you're, for example, in a wheelchair, you need a place to stop and rest every so often, especially if you're going up or going down. You don't want to just keep rolling down the hill. I mean, for some of those.
Yeah, I don't have any measurements to give you, but yes, some of them are long.
Well, yeah, and the important thing is that the higher up the slope, the less grade change. So if the trail is at the highest point on the slope as at all possible, then to access the community, it will be a less grade change and then therefore a shorter access point. So those sort of decisions will probably be made when it comes to a final alignment design based on purchase of right-of-ways. But yeah, from our findings, in order to avoid those kind of things, I'll notice in the engineering alignment between MLK and 12th Avenue, they just followed the contour line to make their assignment easy. But there was plenty of room to have it slowly go up at ADA slope, acceptable slope, so that it would be, once it got to 7th Avenue, where you would want to access the MAX station in the neighborhood, all those businesses there, that there would be an easy off-ramp off the slope. So the engineering alignment is not the perfect alignment, and concerns like that should be taken when it gets to final design.
Yeah.
Yes, 2 questions. One, when you came up with the number of... Hold it down. Thank you. Okay. When you came up with the number of people that live in the area, like the half-mile area, did this include the current population, or does it assume new development? Because in our area, there's a lot of new development.
It's 2000 census data that we work with.
Okay, so that is really a very soft number, and it could be much higher.
Yeah, in the report, there's discussion about reasonable multipliers for that.
Okay.
As the years go by.
Second question, did you look at the type of usage by section of the trail, like what part would tend to be commuter, say for example, versus recreational, or did you make any?
I don't think we got to that level of detail in the demand, but it strikes me, obviously, that the closer you get to the commercial and business areas in downtown, you're likely to get more commuter traffic as opposed to further out east where you run into some more of the residential areas.
That's an interesting question. I think this trail should definitely be for transportation purposes and for recreational purposes. But I think it's interesting in that because it connects up with a lot of regional, other long, wide sweeping regional trails, is that what's nice about that is that you can take it to go downtown or to go to the Lloyd Center or wherever where there's heavy employment. Then you can also take it the other way, whether east to go out, like I kind of mentioned earlier, out towards Boring, Powell Butte, areas for recreational purposes, which are great recreational destinations, or even down towards downtown and then up through around and up towards Forest Park, which is another recreational destination. So it should be both.
One reason I was asking is when we went through the Albina zone change, the real key there was the mode split that could be geared. And that is so close to the employment centers. I thought there could be a reasonable assumption that could take a significant part of the mode split. But I don't know if that's so.
There definitely needs to be more study on that because in different segments of the trail, you see different dynamics. I know at the Providence Hospital right off 47th, they have an annex building, and people who leave that building, you just go and stand and watch. You see all the people who leave that building walk up to Halsey and walk down Halsey, which is a very narrow sidewalk next to very busy traffic. And I've actually asked some people too, but where are you going? Yeah, I'm going to the Hollywood Transit Center. So in the segment from the Hollywood Transit Center to 47th, there's going to be a lot of people who are trying to get to the transit center from their employment. And in other areas, maybe people coming down 33rd out of Grant Park neighborhoods up in Northeast might be coming down 33rd and want to get on the trail and head straight west to go to Lloyd Center to go to work at a major employment center. So.
Mike.
This may be a little outside of your study, but I was wondering if you looked at the integration of bicyclists and pedestrians back into the street network once they left the trail, and what sort of problems that might cause with bicyclists going wrong way on sidewalks or.
Well, we did a walking tour several times, and we counted approximately 50 potential access points on the north side of the corridor, and those are just dead-end streets. And so people could leave and go into a dead-end street, or they would be at bridges with these ramps we were talking about. And so I don't see potential conflicts with the network because once they would get there, they would use the existing facilities. Perhaps they would have to cross a street, and maybe a street crossing would be needed to be improved. And on the south side, there's 17 existing bridges that are good for pedestrian and bicycle crossings. So at those crossings, if there are bike lanes already, which many of them are, there should be no problem. It might be that people will start using those crossings more often and they're not appropriate.
And we're also, Mike, recommending that those 17 bridges be the first priority because it will allow, obviously, folks on the south side of the freeway corridor to get to the trail.
And then, so are ramps on both sides of bridges or just?
No, the existing transportation network on the south side would, if there's any needs for improvements in the future, would be needed. But there's existing sidewalks and bike lanes.
And then, like on the east-west.
Yeah,
right.
East-west on
Like,
both sides.
if I'm going.
Yeah, I see of the trail. Yeah, it's basically most bridges you can access the bridge as you're coming from the east or from the west, but some can't. So the recommended alignment by the engineers shows that some places only connection on one side of a bridge or the closest street. Questions over here? We have two. Outside in the back.
Okay, I noticed in one of your slides that you have the estimated usage as 720 people per day.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious if you looked at the weather-related effects on bicyclists. Like, to me, it just seems like more people would use the trail during the summer months, but in a city like Portland, where 8 to 9 months we have inclement weather, so would this still be a viable alternative?
That number was generated by a bicycle demand model that they use in the city of Seattle. So one of the reasons why we thought it, it's not a foolproof model by any means. It's kind of a work in progress. So put that disclaimer out there. But that being said, it was developed by the city of Seattle, similar climate, similar topography. So we felt that it was applicable in that way. That being said, that is, that model is a work in progress. Predicting bike travel is hardly a exact science at this point, I would say.
Ariana.
What kind of
had a question.
What kind of
Go ahead, Ariana.
what kind of inputs go into that model? Just out of curiosity.
I wish, if you want, afterwards, we have our document. You can take a look at it. It's interesting, but I didn't do that section of the document, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what went into it. But if either of you two guys know, then
I won't say offhand. It's
take a look at it afterwards.
It's
interesting.
complicated.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you took a look at the existing bike path on 84 east of 122nd and maybe compared. I mean, my perception is that it's not used very much, and I don't know if there's some lessons to be learned from that.
Yeah, there was the section we had quality of trail for users. There were several slides there which showed the MAX stations and showed how people were standing right next to railroad and highway with no buffer. And then there was a couple slides of our existing rails with trails, such as the OMSI to Springwater and the Riverwalk and the MAX 205 trail segment that shows that there's a bike trail right next to a rail and highways with, rail mostly with just a fence, no buffer. And the trail you're talking about out on I-84 east of 122nd is similar, except it's not a railroad, it's a highway. There's a trail, a chain link fence, and then a highway. And I think the argument we tried to make was that similar to the effort that was done on the east side Esplanade, there needs to be more buffer, if not just for sound and sake, but also for so to make it enjoyable to use and safety. So we didn't look at that trail because it wasn't rails with trails. Although the funny thing is our trail will one day hopefully link to that trail to be able to go east to Sandy River.
I'm sorry, just to follow up on it. That's what I wanted to point out, that you have to keep in mind, if you look at this trail, and we keep talking about our study area, which is the scope of our project, which was between I-205 and East Bank Esplanade. But the goal for this is to be a long regional trail, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it would connect to that. And so feasibly, effectively, it could take you from the Willamette River out to the Sandy River eventually without ever having to deal with traffic. And one other thing to keep in mind is you don't always get on a trail. It's not always just the experience of being on that trail. It's where it takes you. Maybe it's going to take you out to a bunch of, off-road trails, mountain biking trails. Maybe you're taking your mountain bike. I've done it myself plenty of times. I go out to Powell Butte. And, the trail itself, the trails that get me there, the off-street paths that get me there are not what I'm in it for. I'm in it to get to Powell Butte, and that's when I'm going to have my fun. And so I think that that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. It's a regional trail. It'll take you out to these really fun places to go.
A couple of quick ones, and then it's time to wrap up.
We got one here in the front.
Since you have the group here, you might ask for a show of hands, but in regard to the presentation, the slideshow itself, I thought the slides were a little too fast. And without an audio portion, maybe some comments on the slides might be okay. Maybe their location at where you're at, or possibly a design element or design problem that might be unique to that location.
Specifically about the virtual tour segment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Ariana?
I just wanted to comment on the bike path that's out past 122nd, is it? The one that goes out on I-84. And it seems to me that a lot of people have said that it's kind of a design issue with that trail, why it's not very well used, that it's not a very comfortable place. So it sounds like they're trying to incorporate some better design into this trail. So.
And then there may be a couple more questions. I want to add one thing. The city of Maywood Park, I said it right, is along the I-205 trail. And not only will this trail provide uninterrupted, no road crossings, no railroad crossing for all the people who use it to downtown, but via I-205, the residents of Maywood Park will also have uninterrupted access to the Willamette River. So I definitely think one recommendation we didn't talk about much, but I was just thinking about now is the city of Portland might want to work with that city to help develop this regional trail. Any more questions?
Yeah, that kind of touches on what I had a comment and a question. And one is that, because I bike to school all the time, and I'm jealous of people that live in Sellwood because they can just zoom from their house pretty much to downtown without having to deal with a lot of traffic. And I think having a north-south line would be great. I wonder politically almost if you sold it as sort of a, or I'm sorry, east-west, right there. If you sold it as sort of a bike superhighway kind of thing, that maybe it would get more support from city council, because I know that that's one complaint, that the large bike population is always looking for more ways to to get around and safely. And I wondered if maybe in your research, you just kind of commented on it, if you found other kind of examples of that, and if that's kind of, if you think maybe in a political sense that might give this project more leverage.
Well, we're definitely pitching it that way. The footer on the bottom of every page of our document reads an east-west trail through the heart of Portland. Just Jerry.
I have a quickie on funding. One is you should include some discussion about a business improvement district. You've got a hell of a lot of businesses within a very short buffer of that line. And you ought to reference the Metro's traffic relief options study, because that study designed a tolling of 84 with upgrades of alternative transportation routes along 84, and that spins off a boatload of cash. I don't care how costly your bike highway is, it will pay for it, guaranteed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
I wasn't aware of that one. Okay, well, I think we're running up against the clock here.
Thank you guys for the feedback.